Hello everybody, welcome to episode 78 of Show Viewers. Today we'll be going over episode 2 of Daemons of the Shadow Realm. Now this episode opened with a phenomenal opening. Like the opening's animation was sick. I mean, it's already uploaded on the Crunchyroll YouTube channel, so if you want to go watch that, I highly recommend doing so because it is a beautiful, just like sickly, like awesome, just intro, and especially the music. The music is phenomenal. I believe it is Tobutoki by Vondi, which did Chainsaw Blood for the Chainsaw Man series, so it has a good record behind it, and it most certainly popped off here. But yeah, so we just kind of started off the episode with where we left off on the previous one, with the Guardians of the Left and the Right. So, well, actually, we didn't actually start with that. We started with a brief intro with Yuru's dad showing him the secret passage beneath the statues of the left and right. But then we go into the left and right guardians. They introduce themselves and they just kind of reveal what they are and how Yuru is their new master. And they also recognize Dara as a daemon retainer. And so we see as this goes along, and ultimately Gabby ends up pulling up the little tooth daemon user, and she comes up and she's like, "Oh crap!" And they deduce down that she is the person who's been killing everyone. So what she ends up doing is tries to attack. Well, actually, this is Yuru has a brief moment. He's like, "Okay, I need you." He's talking to the daemons of the left and the right. I'm just going to refer to them as male and female because I don't believe they have been specified which one is left, which one is right yet. So I'm just going to call the female one because there's one with the female design and there's one with the male design. And so he tells them to go and help save the people around the area, and he also tells them not to touch or not to lay hands on Gabby because he wants to take Gabby himself. And they get all happy, like, yeah, our leader's a hands-off type of guy. But so we see as Yuru uses his arrows and his bow to kind of shoot at Gabby, and we also see, though, as the female version of the female guardian acts indirectly, but also in assistance to Yuru. So what she ends up doing is she ends up fighting the tooth daemon, like the mouth daemon thing. And she ends up piecing him up, so Gabby is left like undefended. So Yuru is able to get a shot through her leg and a shot through her shoulder. So this ultimately incapacitates Gabby for the time being. But then we swap over briefly to a scene with Asa. Now, like the old Asa, and we see as she is kind of piecing it, well, not piecing, but kind of interrogating Granny Yamaha. And we see that Granny Yamaha, the like little demon thing that came out of Asa in the previous episode to attack, when it came out of little Asa to attack big Asa in the previous episode, was actually presumably a daemon in control by Granny Yamaha. So we see this, and ultimately she ends up leaving Yamaha alive and runs off. And during this, we then see as we get to see the male guardian, and he's going about saving everyone. We see as he pulls up on the girl who got her mom killed right in front of her last episode, and he's like, "Yo, I'm here to save you," and she cannot believe what he is. She ends up fainting, and we see that a bunch of these kids have fainted because they can't believe what he is. But yeah, so all this ends up happening, and when he's coming out from the building he's been storing the kids in, he at one point sees Asa, who is running to go and help Gabby, and she ends up looking at him, turning and hitting him her blast force field thing, and he ends up changing into his like ethereal, spiritual kind of like beast looking form that we see in the previous episode when they take down the helicopters, and this ends up blocking it. But then ultimately the female guardian Dara and Yuru end up pulling up, and Yuru has his bow pulled on Asa as she is trying to help Gabby. And we see as Yuru asks who she is, and she's like, "I'm Asa, I'm your older sister." And he's like, "No, Asa's too young, and she doesn't have like this glare in her eyes." And then she explains how what happened was 10 years ago, Yuru's and Asa's parents fled the village, but they also fled with Asa. And as a way to keep Yuru in the village and keep him from searching and going with him, Granny Yamaha in the village ended up conjuring a plan of having this fake Asa, who was controlled by that daemon thing, with Granny Yamaha to keep Yuru in, because he had the spirit of a big brother and he wasn't going to leave his little sister behind. And this was essentially to imprison Yuru in the area of the village. And so we then see as ultimately he ends up not killing Asa, and this then allows Gabby and Asa to get away, and then Dara, and the two Daemons end up running off as well. They end up getting down out of the village, and we actually hear a bunch of discussion about this like during these events, but we can hear about the world below, and just while all this is transpiring, where we see as the force field overhead begins to form again, because Yamaha has regained her, like, I guess, standing and all that, her, like, stability, so she has reformed the barrier, because she is the one was trying to keep Yuru imprisoned. So we see this, and they run on the hill, and ultimately Dara ends up meeting up with Hannah, who was the one who was on the phone with briefly after he ended up not actually dying in the first episode. And we see that she is also a fellow Daemon retainer, and she is of the modern or lower world as well. And we kind of see they briefly have a funny interaction where they have to explain to Yuta and the Daemons what a car is. But then after that, we see as Asa and Gabby are out in they actually were able to escape before the force field closed down. So they're out there, and they're waiting, and they ultimately meet up with a character by the name of Kamagori. Now, Kamagori is like the higher-up of their organization that they're a part of. Well, one of the higher-ups of the organization they're a part of. And we see, as he comes along, and they just briefly discuss about stuff, and he actually ends up recognizing Dara by name, and he's like, okay, that must be Tadera. And we see they briefly talk about, like, Daemon retainers and stuff like that. So then, after that, we end up going to the perspective of all the little group with Hana, Dara, Yuru, and the Daemons. And then we see, I'll just say the Guardians, because the Guardians is more specific for them. And we see they're just driving down the road, and they're kind of yapping generally. And then we see as this character, or this being by the name of an Oshira-sama, ends up pulling up on like a white horse and like full of white clothing and all that. And she briefly discusses with Dara and the Daemons on top about what's going on and stuff like that. Well, she predominantly with the Guardians. She speaks to the Guardians briefly about what's going on and everything. They explain how they have a new youthful master, and how he is one of the twins who sunder the moon and the sun. And they just kind of briefly discussed that, and then she ends up going off. Now, one thing I noticed that was odd about her horse is her horse had like a scar around its neck, as if its like throat had been slit or something. So I just found that kind of weird. I don't know why that detail was there, but we see then as Hana and they're actually freak out a little bit because Yuru doesn't understand like the gravity of the situation he's in, and they reveal to him that there are multiple types of Daemons, and how like the Guardians were predominantly combat types, while this one was what we call an Oshira-sama. But then we end up kind of seeing as ultimately Kamagori, Gabby, and Asa end up leaving the mountain and ultimately get off. And then we actually get to see a brief clip of these two soldiers who have been trying to escape the mountain, but since the force field closed back down, they are stuck within the village and they cannot escape. And yeah, that's really where the episode ends. We got our outro for this. The outro was pretty good. It wasn't as good as the opening, but the ending, well, I would say the ending rather than, I would say opening, ending rather than intro and outro. But yeah, the ending wasn't as good as the opening, but it was still a really good song. But yeah, that's all that really happened in episode 2 of Daemons of the Shadow Realm. And yeah, it was a great episode once again. I'm going to continue to keep watching it because it's great so far, and I'm loving it. I'm loving the art style and everything. And the comedy is there too. Like, Full Metal Alchemist was so good because it could go from like moments of like tense, like maturity, and have little comedy like bits thrown in there. And that's what Daemons of the Shadow Realm have done so far. And but yeah, also I forgot to mention, but we got to see Danji briefly, and he protected his mom, so we got to see that Danji and his mom did end up living the massacre on the village. But yeah, that's all that really happens in the episode, and that's all I really have for episode 78 of Shelf Review. So thank you very much for watching.